Welcome to the A2 Show with Andrew Cass and Aaron Parkinson, bringing you the trends and topics that affect our lives the most: business, politics, fitness, family, and finance. With over 50 plus years of combined business experience and over $1 billion in revenue generated, your hosts have a unique gift for seeing many steps ahead where others do not. They bring their unfiltered, contrarian views to the show every week to help you win in business and in life.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the unusual alliance that just took place between Kennedy and Trump. I had to digest this one, Aaron, for about a week. We're maybe a little late. We're maybe a little late to the party here on this news, because this is the biggest news I've seen in politics in my entire life in America, is seeing a lifelong Democrat join forces with a controversial Republican, I guess you could say. So why are we talking about it? Because it means so much to the political landscape. There's a lot here to unpack. I have a page of notes, Aaron. I'm going to reference in the show notes probably the most thorough interview since with Tucker Carlson, which was a 2-hour dissection, in Kennedy's words himself, as to what's going on here. Long lineage Democrat joining forces with the Republicans. Why? What's going on? I can tell you it's nothing what it appears on the surface. It isn't. It isn't, in my view, Aaron. Well, I suddenly like Trump. He's my buddy, and I'm going to be in alliance with him. It's actually the exact opposite. This goes so much deeper. We're going to unpack it here today. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I think for those people who don't maybe follow politics, you know, we talk about business, we talk about fitness, we talk about family, we talk about finance, we talk about politics. There's a lot of people that are not like you, that don't follow politics as closely as you do.
I would think the majority, if I had to guess.
Yep, including me. And, you know, you definitely followed a lot closer than I do. Maybe we could kick off today with what happened. Who were the three people running? What happened? And then dive in a little bit deeper on it.
Yeah, I think we should, because I think that even surprisingly, Aaron, you know that I've been a big Robert F. Kennedy fan for a long time. You have as well. We've researched a lot of his policies and his stances, and he was, as an independent candidate, probably the brightest spot in politics we've seen in a lot of years. Right. Yep. To see this third party, independent, meet in the middle kind of an angle. But here's what happened, though. While that swell was taking place, I like to call it a people's revolution, he was being censored, marginalized, and canceled by his own party. That was not something he wanted to have happen. That was not something he foresaw happening. In fact, he wanted to run as a Democrat. He's been a lifelong Democrat. John F. Kennedy, for those that don't know, is his uncle, one of the most loved presidents in American history. Bobby Kennedy, his dad, is JFK's brother, was also running for president, got shot. Both were killed. I mean, there's a lot here, and he's running, or was running, on the exact same policies as JFK. So if you do any research and you like history, or you care about history, and you really should if you're an American taxpayer and you're voting in the election, RFK was running on the exact same platform as JFK and his dad, Bobby Kennedy Sr. So running as a for the people, people first, profit second, you know, against the establishment, against conflicts of interest, against agency capture, against over-regulation, like really just a good independent, somewhat conservative, back then liberal, because today liberal is not really liberal, it's actually conservative. So we're sort of all over the place. But when he realized that in the state of New York, and I think I mentioned this, Aaron, recently, he was removed from the ballot by the DNC. He said, I can't play this game anymore. I want to run honestly. I want to run on my policies. I want to be able to debate. I want to be able to have open conversation. But if you're removing me from the ballot, and by the way, it cost him $10 million of his own money, Aaron, to fight that case. He's a resident of New York. They actually said he's not. So like Russia, Soviet, North Korea style stuff, they actually sued him and said, because you currently live in California, you're not a resident of New York, we're suing you. We're removing you from the ballot, which means we don't want the people to choose their candidate. This is all past tense, okay? This is recent. He said, whoa, how am I going to be able to compete and get on a debate stage? And I'm on 40 ballots already. You're going to remove me from New York, which is a huge state. And it's a state that he has 3 residences in, and his law license is there, and his driver's license is there, and his hunter's license is there. And you're saying he's not a New Yorker, but yet he grew up in New York, and Bobby Kennedy's a New Yorker, his dad. It's like, where do we live? So he basically stepped away and said, I'm going to go to the Democrat Party and I'm going to go to the Republican Party and I'm going to say, listen, this isn't a fair playing field. Here are my issues. Will you hear them out? There's actually 3. The chronic disease crisis is number 1. Censorship is number 2. And the war machine is number 3. Will you help us address these 3 issues? I want to have a stance and a platform for those 3 core issues. I would have added illegal migration personally, but those were his 3. These are my 3 issues. I have a plan around all 3 of these. We can't let either of these 3 escalate or there's nothing left of America in 4 years. Dear Democrats, do you want to hear out my plans? Would you be interested in having me help you architect a plan around the big 3? No return phone call, no response, nothing, ever, nothing. Started with the Democrats, then went to the Republicans, aka Trump and his team. Here are my 3 stances: chronic disease crisis, stopping wars around the world, and the censorship situation is getting out of control. Do you want to hear me out? Do you want to hear my plans to keep these from escalating? Sure, Trump said, and his team. We are willing to hear you out because we stand against all 3 and we want to hear more. That is the reason he said, okay, I'm going to step aside. Very important, though. He's not running. He's not running in 10 states that are battleground states. Kennedy's on the ballot in 40 states. He won't be on in 50 by his choice. Now, here's where things get even funnier. He endorsed Trump because Trump will hear him out and allow him to execute. The other party won't. And he's removing himself from the ballot in 10 battleground states so that he's not in the way of the people choosing, but he's staying on the ballot in 40 states. I'll probably vote for Kennedy in Florida, right? Florida's not a battleground state, right? So he's on the ballot in 40 states. The DNC is now suing him because he wants to get off the ballot. So he was sued to be taken off the ballot. I kid you not. Can't make this stuff up. It's like a Saturday Night Live episode. And now as he's removing himself from the 10 battleground states, they're suing him again to keep him on the battleground states. So I maybe that's a long answer to a short question, but we are in way, way, way uncharted territory, and there's nothing democratic and there's nothing American happening here. So unpack that, Aaron, as somebody who I guess, it's a lot. It's a mouthful because it's a mouthful.
Well, it's just such an interesting situation. You started off today's show with saying you've never seen something or something along the lines of this is the most interesting thing that's ever happened in politics. I wouldn't say in politics, period, but I would say coming into a vote, it's definitely
coming into the election cycle.
Thing. Yeah, it's definitely the most interesting thing I can ever remember.
No doubt about it.
I think for me as an outsider, Obama running and Obama winning was actually like this feeling, and I don't know if Americans felt it, but the rest of the world outside of America looked at Obama getting elected and said, good for you, America. You've finally broken through the glass ceiling of an African American holding a position of that power. From the outside looking in, all the conversations that I was having with my friends was, well done, America. You have finally evolved to a place where this is possible for anybody. Good job. Like that was the general feeling and consensus outside of America. Inside, obviously, people were divided on Obama getting elected, right? But
yeah, but it's just Republican Democrat stuff. I mean, he earned it. He won it. He ran a great campaign. Bottom line.
Yeah, and but the outside world was pretty sure that America, with all of its racial conflicts all the time, would never allow that to happen. So that was a big thing. That was a big thing
for a candidate, yes, and a minority candidate, yes. I guess my big thing in the beginning was to see the joining of forces of a lifelong Democrat with a Republican. That's my
all I'm saying is that was probably the most unique situation I remember for an election in America.
An election, yeah.
I don't know if things are well publicized enough because, like you said, RFK has literally been almost censored across the board by every major media outlet.
Pretty much.
So I'm not really sure that people even understand how much traction he was getting and what a weird situation this is.
Right.
Where when you were taking grassroots votes, he was winning. He was beating everybody.
Man. He was winning
but
big.
He couldn't get on any debate stages.
They're
right. Suing him left and right, trying to keep him off, get him on. Like there's a lot of fear around what RFK could bring to the table and a lot of weaponizing of different systems to keep him out.
Absolutely right.
So he tried to run as a Democrat. They wouldn't even take him. They boxed him out. which was crazy.
Boxed him out and changed the rules of the primary to box him out.
Yep, and then they wouldn't give him Secret Service protection when his whole family has been murdered, which is crazy. And and he voiced that as well. Like, of all people that should probably get Secret Service protection, don't you think it should be a Kennedy? But okay. And he kept piling through here, and he could have pushed through. And there's even a potential chance that he could have won, or he could have got enough votes to legitimately start a third party in the next election cycle. And people are asking themselves right now, did you sell out? Did you sell out because you want attention, you were going to lose, and your only way to get that attention is with Trump? That's a question that some people have. And then the other question people have on the other side is, are you just so passionate about what you're doing that you were willing to supplant your ego for the benefit of the American public and partner with somebody that historically you don't like? I mean, he has sued Trump. Correct. Historically.
Correct.
He has voiced that he's not a fan of the person.
Correct.
He has voiced that he is a fan of some of the policies, but not the person.
Correct.
So is he a sellout, or is he the ultimate martyr in this situation?
It's a great question. So I'm also gonna link to the article I shared with you in the show notes, because that was a really long article that answered that question exactly from someone who was inside the campaign since the beginning. And I thought it was a really good, in addition to the Tucker Carlson interview, we'll link to that article from somebody who basically answered the question Aaron just asked. Which one is it, right? And I think it's a really good question. Now, the other thing I want to point out to a couple points you made is his Secret Service protection was just pulled again last week because he endorsed Trump. So we're going to go even deeper here, okay? That's number one. And by the way, you would think on the surface, of course it was, he stepped out and he endorsed Trump. Not true. To your point, Aaron, he's still on the ballot. This is a really important fact. He's still on the ballot in 40 states, and he's staying on the ballot in 40 states so that you can still vote for him if you like him as an independent candidate for all the reasons that you and I mentioned right here. Again, really important to point out, he's only stepped off the ballot in 10 battleground states. Those are the states that, if anybody doesn't know what a battleground state is, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, states like that, where it's always really, really close down to thousands of votes, where any third-party candidate could sway it either way. His big concern is, I don't want to sway things toward the current Democrat Party is more like a socialist communist regime right now. Not my opinion. All the data is out. Just listen to the last 5 minutes of this podcast and you'll see the Russia-style tactics. So he stepped away from that and he said, I don't want to risk the chance of us going deeper for another 4 years into that kind of rule. So for now, he's removing himself from those ballots. But he said in his speech, if you want to vote for me, I'm on the ballot in 40 states as an independent. And if I get more than 5% of the votes, I actually have the ability to qualify to start a third party, which is not off the table. So I want to just be clear that he didn't completely quit, step out, and say I'm endorsing Trump. He said, I'm stepping out of 10 states. I'm suspending my campaign, but I'm staying on the ballot for you, the people that like me and want to vote for me and could never see yourself voting for Trump or Kamala. There's a lot of those people, by the way. There's a ton of people that no matter what, they're not voting for Trump, and no matter what, they're not voting for Kamala. I would say that's 30% either way. That's 60% of the population right there. It's a big number. So he's on the ballot, Aaron. Really important to point out. I live in Florida. Like I said, not a battleground state. Most likely I'll vote for Kennedy because I'm part of the independent. I'm a registered independent, and I like where that was going. But I'll size things up where it goes. In a little bit, we'll talk about what does the alliance between him and Trump mean, because here's the outcome that could affect all Americans positively is the fact that there's a potential uniparty that is being generated here and that's surfacing here. And a uniparty is really, really good for America because now it brings all sides, left, right, middle, into decisions where now it's so polarized, it's either right or left.
I guess the thing that kind of confuses me a little bit is, why would you take yourself off the battleground states but leave yourself on the other ones? Because if the whole idea is I'm sacrificing potentially some of my belief systems to help the public combat these issues, so the public is more important to me than even my own belief systems in some case, or my own personal, vendettas. I don't know if that's the right word. Why not just remove yourself off of all of them in the hopes that maybe Trump's party would pick up those votes in those states?
Because the states don't have, because in America, there's only about 10 states that matter.
Really?
At the end of, and interestingly, to your point, it's a good question, and I have the answer. So interestingly, in America, because of the Electoral College, Aaron, you probably know that Florida has something like 28 votes. California has like 52 votes. Texas has. So no matter what you do in those states, they're always notoriously going to be Democrat or they're always notoriously going to be Republican. So take Texas. Texas is predominantly always going to be a far-right Republican-driven state, 80%. New York, on the other hand, far left blue Democrat state 80% of the time. So staying on the ballot in those states keeps him in the game to qualify for that 5% as an independent, but it never sways the votes in those states because it's too big of a gap. The removal
so you just don't think that extra 5% that you could maybe get would make a difference.
He's done the math. Yeah, he's done the math. His team's done the math. Him being on the ballot affects nothing in those states. There's such big swings to the left and the right that they're not what's called battleground states. The 10 battleground states are so close that third-party candidates can truly drive an election towards someone else. Ross Perot was the closest it's ever happened to. He was very close to winning. He had 19% popularity, 19% of the vote at one point. He was giving Bill Clinton a run for his money at one point. And by the way, Aaron, very important distinction, is he was on every debate stage and he was on mainstream media just as much as, I think it was Bush. Was it Bush? Clinton and I don't remember, but whoever the Democrat was.
He got a lot of media attention. He got a lot of media attention. It was very fair. There was still a lot of people that said he can't win, but at least he got a fair shake at it.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't feel like RFK got a fair shake at it.
That's exactly right. You just nailed it. So that if you look at history, you go, why was the independent candidate Ross Perot taken seriously and interviewed and heard out, but why Kennedy isn't? I mean, there's a couple reasons. I'll talk about why Kennedy has been marginalized and censored, which is really important to understand. But to your question earlier, does that make sense now that he can't staying on the ballot in those 40 states won't change anything, but in the 10 it will. So he's only coming off the 10 and he's staying in the game for that 5% because who knows where things are going to end up. Right? Just because he endorsed Trump doesn't mean he's like all of a sudden going to flip Republican and now all of a sudden be a Republican. And by the way, Tulsi Gabbard came into the mix. Yeah, they want that uniparty strategy. They want to do what's right for the country and see if they can't bring a million ideas together and really do what's right and focus on those three core issues. But what if 2 years down the road, Trump ends up getting elected and it doesn't work out? And he goes, well, we didn't agree. We didn't see eye to eye. We tried. I'm going to go form I qualified to form my third party in 2028. So quitting now altogether, Aaron, would almost be like you're running a business successfully for 5 or 10 years and you get a cool idea and you just throw the business to the side and go work on the new idea. But then the new idea doesn't work out in 2 years. And because you didn't stay with the core business that had a proof of concept, you now have nothing. So there's that element of keeping the independent staple in the ground, if you will, while he's potentially working with the Trump campaign, uniparty, and bringing some key people from the left in, just to stop the socialism train wreck that's taken place over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think in marketing, and as you know, I run an agency. I always tell people the confused mind says no. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a little bit concerned that he stayed on these other 40 ballots because the confused mind might say, am I voting for him or is he with Trump?
Fair point.
I don't really understand which one, so I'm not really going to go either way. And that could potentially hurt them. I understand the math that you're talking about, but I think in a perfect world for me, if I was going all in to try and push through this agenda by partnering with Trump, I'd probably pull myself from 40 states. But hey, I mean, he was running for president. He's probably smarter than I am.
Well, listen, no disrespect to me or you here. I think Kennedy's a lot smarter than both of us when it comes to a lot of issues.
Probably.
So I always believe he's playing chess while maybe you and I are playing checkers. So he tends to always be a step or two ahead or a thought or two ahead, and his research is second to none, and he's published more books than I have on my shelves here with enough data to prove his points. So again, if you focus on these big three issues as to why he did it, who's going to allow me to do what listen, I saw this guy shed a tear at the end of his speech announcing this. So when you talk in the beginning about which one is it for press and for notoriety, or is it because I genuinely care so much that I need to just align with someone who's going to allow me to help with these three big topics, ending wars, ending censorship, and ending the chronic disease crisis? I believe, and anybody can have their own belief, that it's genuinely coming from his heart. And I believe it for two reasons. Number one, because I've studied him for 5 years. I know him well, and I genuinely like him. Number two, I watched him shed a tear in the interview. And number three, in the Tucker Carlson interview down below that we're linking to, He said one thing in the middle. He said, I would give my life to save one child from the chronic disease crisis that America is in right now. I would give my life to save one kid. And he said it with so much passion and enthusiasm and authenticity that I was just as blown away by that statement as I was with the tears coming down his eyes when he was talking about the chronic disease crisis in his opening speech. So my belief is, to your point earlier, that it's coming truly from who will embrace what I know and what I can change, who won't. And again, he was clear. One party wanted nothing to do with it. They are war machines. They are censorship machines, and they don't give two shits about the chronic disease crisis because it's never, ever been mentioned once. All they do is ramrod vaccines down people's throats, and they never talk about the chronic disease crisis or health or anything. They just talk about, I don't even know what they talk about because I can't keep track of Kamala Harris's speeches because I can't tell if it's a Saturday Night Live episode or an actual speech. So I believe he's coming from the heart.
Where do you think this goes from here? What type of impact do you think this has on the election?
Right now, I think it's going to have a huge impact in the 10 battleground states because it's so tight in those states, shockingly, right? And again, Aaron and I are independent guys here, probably with conservative values. I can't believe it's close only because Kamala Harris didn't get elected. She got installed. No primary, as you know. And because she doesn't really run on anything. She's just very giddy and she laughs and giggles and she says ideas here and there. She did a CNN interview last week, which was one of the scariest interviews I think I've ever seen. I've never seen somebody just get thrown one softball after another and then they cut away and go to commercials. I mean, nothing was, she had a chaperone with her. I mean, how are you doing an interview running as the woman of color? Great. But yet you bring the white man to be your chaperone and basically sit by your side as like your bodyguard. I don't know if you caught that. It was insane. It was just anti everything they're running on, right? And it was tough to listen to her answers to very, very basic questions. And CNN doesn't push hard enough. They ask basic softball questions and they don't go, well, explain that a little more. How would that work? How do you figure that? What would make that the way you say it is? So it was really soft. So I don't know how it's close. I think a lot of the gaslighting in the media is very far left and they're just anti-Trump and like Trump or hate Trump. You know, he's been alienated big time and he's been made the villain. And I'm sure he's not perfect by any means, I think, but neither is Biden by any means. Biden was censoring Americans his first month in office and he was undoing 27 different border laws that opened the border to illegal migration and he was flooding our cities. So who's a worse guy? The guy who falsifies business records or has girls saying he raped them from 32 years ago, or the guy who's slamming the country with illegal migration and censoring Americans? I mean, take your pick. I don't think either guy's perfect, right? But at the end of the day, you got to look at timing and you have to look at motivation. So if you believe Trump has 91 counts against him and he's this horrible, ruthless, awful guy, the first question I would have is, why did all the counts come 2 years after he was out of office and only after he said he was going to run again? That would be my first question. Secondly, the people who are telling you Trump is this horrible, evil, convicted felon guy are the same people who told you COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective, the border has never been more secure, and wars around the world are good for Americans. These are those people. So you have to just take it all with a grain of salt and somehow stay in the middle and go, okay, Trump probably isn't perfect, but he's definitely not an America last guy. He's clearly an America first guy. It'd be tough to argue that the current Build Back Better regime of Biden and Harris is an America first regime. Pretty much everything they're doing is an America last philosophy at this time. So Kennedy knows that. And he's actually aligning with Trump because he understands how bad things could get if Build Back Better Part 2 takes shape. That's where he's at. He's not at Trump's my buddy, I'm going to be a Republican. He's at, we've got to fix these three issues. They don't want to talk about them. In 4 more years of those guys, and we don't have a country left.
You make a lot of predictions. Oftentimes you are correct. If you look back historically at the different episodes that we've run, what do you predict happens in this election?
You sure you want that answer? Would you like a cocktail before I give it to you?
I want to know what you actually think is going to happen.
I'm afraid to share what I actually think, Aaron, because it's pretty dark.
Well,
but I'm going to do it anyways because you asked. And you're my buddy.
Know, not what you want to happen.
I'm not exactly my. I can tell you what I want, and I can tell you what I think are two different things. So I'm going to answer both for you because you asked, and it's a great question. I don't think Trump is electable. I've said this for many years now. If you understand how truly corrupt this Democrat establishment is, for all the reasons we opened the show with, and that's just a small piece of it, there are people who are willing to die and willing to go to jail, Aaron, to see that he's not elected president of the United States again. It's a very scary thing to be. Now, don't take my word for it. He was just shot at, and 91 counts were brought against him. This is lawfare at the highest level. Don't have to take my word for it. Alan Dershowitz, a lifelong liberal Democrat, probably the top legal scholar, Harvard scholar in America, advised the O.J. Simpson trial to success, like O.J. or hate him, wrote the book, Get Trump, exactly how they use lawfare to keep him from running. He didn't have to write it. He's not a Republican. He hates Trump. He's a lifelong liberal Democrat scholar. So lawfare, attempted assassination, I fear that they're going to see one of the two through before November and there's no Trump. Either jail or shot at. And I hate to say it because I wouldn't wish it on either party ever in America. It brings me no pleasure to say it. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, where does that leave the party? J.D. Vance is the VP who's been sworn in. Does that now go to him, kind of like it went to Kamala before? I don't know. But I don't think Trump can get elected. And they also have one of my research groups called Strategic Intelligence also made a prediction that even if Trump does get elected, there's a clause that the Democrats may try to use against him to not allow him to be sworn in due to the January 6th thing. You know, they called it an insurrection, but yet Trump never even used the words. So that whole thing is being weaponized now as well. We won't even get into that, right? So can he get elected? I don't think so. Will they allow him to be sworn in? Maybe not. That's what I think is going to happen, but I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it's a fair election. But I don't see how that's possible because the hatred is so high for this one man. But it isn't because of his crimes. And it isn't because what we think. It's because he knows so much. It's the same with Kennedy. These guys want to come in and unwind the machine. They want to come in and unwind corruption at the highest level globally, no less. They want to give choice back to the people. These are things that scare the living shit out of the current regime, and they don't want to lose power. So what they're going to do is they're going to probably continue to try to throw charges at Trump. Who knows if they go after him and try to take him out again? I wouldn't be using any Secret Service from the U.S. government at this point. I hope to God he's not. Kennedy's Secret Service has been pulled. What does that tell you? These two guys together are the worst nightmare in the history of this party because both guys are coming for the establishment, and they're coming for the corporate greed, and they're coming for all of the conflicts of interest, and they're coming for all the agency capture. And here's the thing they said on stage, which scared me even more. They're going to open the JFK files as well. And they said that on the night that this announcement was made. And as soon as they looked at each other on stage and shook hands and said, if I'm elected, I'm going to open your uncle's files once and for all. By the way, Aaron, the JFK files were supposed to be opened 10 years ago. After 50 years, they need to be declassified. It's been 63, I think.
Well, and Trump said he was going to do that before he was elected.
And he didn't do it. And you know why he didn't do it? And it's in the interview we're gonna share down below in the Tucker interview. When they went into great detail about it. Mike Pompeo, who was the CIA director under Trump, begged Trump not to open the JFK files. Begged him. Pleaded, begged, said America can't handle it. What do you think? Now, this is out in the open now. The second thing Trump said last week was, I'm also going to open the Epstein files.
Ooh.
At that point, I was like, me and one of my buddies, we were texting, one of my clients, great guy. We were like, oh, dear God, we hope he has Secret Service protection following him to the bathroom to brush his teeth at this point. So do you see? So it isn't really, they don't care about Trump's falsifying business records. They don't really care about a lady from 32 years ago that said he kind of maybe groped me and then got paid to say it. Like they don't care about the classified documents that he had in his bedroom when Biden had 4 times the amount in his garage. They don't care about this because if they did, they'd be talking about it on the other side too. Biden's daughter wrote a book about how he essentially raped her. I mean, it's a published book. So they don't care because they don't talk about the other side, right? So it's more about what if he opens these files, Epstein, JFK. What if he appoints RFK to head of human services and he basically runs an audit on every vaccine ever created in this country and realizes that ever since the vaccine schedule went from 4 vaccines to 73 vaccines, autism literally was a straight line off the charts over 10 years. What if this comes out? There's people, Aaron, that are in high places that are going to jail, and they're going to do hard time. So is it really about Trump's business records in women claims, in false, in classified docs? Or is it about him coming in and saying, I see you, you know I see you, I'm not one of you. I started with you 4 years ago and I made some ground, right? I disbanded us from the World Health Organization, corrupt organization. I undid the Paris Agreement, corrupt organization. These are all money games. And he was like, we're not going to give money. He made the UN pay their share. Money game. He made America energy independent. Energy costs are through the roof right now because we're energy dependent. They know this. Do you think that they can handle part 2 of this? And now he knows more and has the experience. And now I might bring RFK along for the ride, someone who knows more, has done more, has seen more, and has had more impact on the environment and corporate capture than anybody, maybe arguably in America. These people, again, long answer to a short question, they're coming for him and they will not let him get elected. I don't see any way that Trump can get elected under the circumstances I just gave you. That's what I think is going to happen, which... where does that leave us?
I think it's pretty obvious.
It's ugly. Now, what do I want to have happen? What I'd like to see happen is I'd like to see what happened in America where I grew up in the 80s and 90s, right? As a kid who was understanding what's going on in the world and now eventually getting to a point where I could vote. I'd like to see a fair election take place that happens in one damn day. There's no mail-in ballots. There's no early voting. You go one day at 9 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, and then the ballots are counted all throughout the day and into the night, and by 11 o'clock that night, you know who the winner is. Those days are gone too. And it isn't because of the Republicans. It's because of the Democrats again. Everything has to be gamed now. We've got people voting from all over the world starting next week. We've got mail-in ballots. I mean, none of this is even really legal at the end of the day. It's all been challenged. So I'd love to see people able to just talk about their philosophies, talk about their policies, debate, not censor, not cancel. Anybody who wants to be on the ballot that qualifies can be, and voting is one day on November 5th or whatever it is, and it's done at 6 o'clock, and if you don't show up and you miss it, you don't get to vote, and you need to have a friggin' ID, and you need to be a United States citizen. These are political, economic 101 type things. That's what I would love to see, and I don't think any of that's going to happen, unfortunately. So it's really not a pretty picture, and I hope I'm wrong about all of it, but most of everything I just said is already happening. Now, who would I like to see win, or what would I like to see there? I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but I showed you what I told you what I'm afraid of having happen, and I'm telling you what I wish would happen. The outcome is the outcome, but I don't know that you can get to an outcome under these circumstances that isn't just an installation of Build Back Better Part 2 because of all the reasons we mentioned. Ballot removal access, election interference, no IDs, not same-day voting. I mean, how do you go up against that? That's like Kennedy trying to be an independent. Now that's Trump trying to run a normal campaign. It's times 2, and now they're together.
Well,
I don't know if you knew a lot of that.
I actually did know a lot of it. We just don't talk about it a lot. I actually was researching the other day, and I found it quite funny because my brain couldn't wrap itself around the idea of somebody being able to show up and vote without ID. I was like, that can't be real. That's real.
They want that.
That's not right.
They want it bad because they can't run on their policies, Aaron.
There's a lot of nonsense that is posted on the news or in social media or whatever that's actually just not true. So I actually research it to find out if it's actually true or not.
Oh,
true.
Yeah. That one's real.
And in a lot of states, you can show up and vote without ID. You just have to sign a signature that says you're actually that person, which I found stupefying.
If you're listening on audio right now, just insert my head just hit the floor face.
Like I could walk in and say, I'm Dan Stevens, an American citizen who lives in New York. I don't have any ID. Well,
but I'm voting come hell or high water, Bubba.
Yeah, please verify that you're Dan Stevens by just signing here. Basically, like I'm some type of notary or something.
Aaron,
that
the
I'm
same
notarizing
people,
that I'm Dan Stevens. Like that is one of the most bizarre concepts.
It's
I've
not
ever
bizarre, Aaron. It's criminal. It's criminal. The same people that threw 91 counts against Trump only 2 years after he was out of office and only after he said he was running for president are the same people who are going around the country registering illegal migrants to vote and without ID, and it's now on the table in 16 states, and now one of those 16 states is a conservative Republican state. So who's doing the damage here, and who are the real bad guys or bad actors here? It really isn't up for debate. I'm not saying that either party is perfect, but we're not even on the same playing field anymore between left and right. And Kennedy basically said, how would I even look myself in the mirror being over here? How about Tulsi Gabbard coming to the table last week, the brightest star of all in the 2020 presidential election as a Democrat, absolutely sizzled Kamala Harris on stage. Clips are all over the web in the debate to run for president in 2020 for the Democrat Party. Their brightest stars just wrote a book and is touring the country on the book that we've talked about before, For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. These are the brightest stars we've ever seen in that party, RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. And they're now, in the last 1 week now, we're recording this beginning of September 2024. In the last 1 week, they've both come onto the Trump, I don't want to say ticket, but they've come onto the Trump bandwagon and said, we don't necessarily love Donald Trump. He isn't our buddy, but we're endorsing this campaign right now for these next 4 years because of everything that Andrew and Aaron just laid out on this podcast here today. Those are their brightest stars ever. They're both way smarter than me. They're probably way smarter than you and I combined when it comes to politics and policy and foreign affairs and economics and all of the things we talked about. So that shows me a lot. Actions speak louder than words. Those are some pretty heavy actions.
I'm going to end today with a curveball question.
Curveball.
As you know, Trump is a really interesting person to study.
He is.
Because first off, he's an unbelievable marketer. If you don't understand
he's a vintage promoter, man. We know this.
You do not understand marketing if you do not understand how good of a marketer Trump is. However, when you're a great marketer, you tend to polarize your audience. You tend to speak to the people that believe what you believe and they love you, and you tend to push away the people who don't believe what you believe. It's actually the best way to market because you build a tribe of very tight followers. It's less consumer, more tribal.
Right on.
So he's done that. So he's got a rabid fan base. He also has a rabid hater base.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And it's 50-50, man. Right down the middle.
Yeah, that's why he's such an interesting person to study.
Uh-huh.
The curveball question I have for you today is, would the Republican Party have a better chance to win if it was RFK running for president with Tulsi Gabbard as his VP, or do they have a better chance to win with Trump, RFK, and Tulsi together?
Did you say Trump running with RFK as his VP? You said something about RFK and Tulsi running together. That would be 2028 in my view.
No, I'm just saying right now, today.
You got Trump and Vance.
Right, so you got Trump and Vance, right? They're running, but they've got the support of RFK and Tulsi.
Got it.
Okay. Does that group have a better chance of winning? Or if RFK was running for president today as the elected nominee for the Republican Party, and he had Tulsi Gabbard as his vice president, as his running mate, which one would have a better chance to win?
I think what you're trying to say is if RFK was running with Tulsi as a Democrat against Trump, not in place of him as a Republican.
No, I'm saying as a Republican.
Okay, well, that could be a scenario in 4 years. So in 4 years, Aaron, what you just, and I actually think it is a scenario. The question is, do they run as independents or do they run as Republicans because they've left the Democrat Party for good? They're never going back. So the question is, I guess that's a huge hypothetical. That means Trump's off the ticket. It would mean a lot, right? It means Trump's off the ticket. It means Tulsi and Kennedy would have had to already transfer over to the Republican Party and take over. Without question, Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard would be the greatest thing that could ever happen to America. I'm going to tell you why. For the reason you mentioned a second ago, because Trump's not a great communicator. He's a great marketer. But Trump should know by now that he isn't just marketing right now. He's also trying to run and unite a country, and there's a different language set that has to take place. Promoting is great. Love it. But you also have to unite and promote. And Kennedy is the master at both promoting and uniting. And that's why I think he's a better player, because right now, really, I shouldn't even say right now, at all times in America, you need somebody who's going to bring both sides together. Trump has the potential to do it. And I actually think it's good that Kennedy and Tulsi are there to maybe be a safety net for him and maybe teach him and coach him and say, listen, we're coming onto your side. We've basically cut all ties. We cut the rope. The boat left. We're here. You've got to start doing things a little bit differently around here if you want to be able to communicate to the party we came from and the people that are true liberals and lifelong JFK, Kennedy, Clinton Democrats in this country. And here's a couple things you can do. I'm hopeful that Kennedy and Tulsi can maybe come in and provide some really important balance to the Trump campaign. And I'm hopeful for that. But I'm not very optimistic because they're cheating every single day, and I don't think we're going to have a free and fair election. If we did, I think it would be a landslide. Trump, Kennedy, Vance, the whole thing. I mean, in a regular fair election, if you looked at the 4 years under Trump and the 4 years under Biden Harris, and you just removed the people and you made a list and you just went right down it, it's like an 80-20 landslide. They didn't do much at all. They didn't secure the country. Inflation's a nightmare. Wars everywhere. Economy's okay, but to your point, you did a masterful job in our last podcast breaking down the fudging of the numbers that just are insane. That's in the last episode. Is there a financial crisis coming? Aaron took the reins on that one and broke down at least 6 or 7 economic figures that are just awful, that they're sugarcoating and making it sound real. So they really broke the country in half. So if you were able to get emotion out of it and remove Trump, remove Harris, remove Biden, remove all the drama, remove all the personalities, and you just made drew a line down a white piece of paper and said, forget, I don't even want to say Trump. How about 2016 to 2020 policies and 2020 to 2024 policies? Forget the names, no emotion, no derangement syndrome, and go down the list of all that took place. Energy independent, secure borders, no wars, no terrorism. Go to the other side, inflation. Do the math. You would be insane to go the last 4 years have been astronomically better than the previous 4. But I don't think a lot of people are capable of getting out of that tribalism. And by the way, in the interview below, Kennedy opens with Tucker on this concept of tribalism, which is really the biggest problem of all.
And as a Canadian, not an American, it's often something we talk about where we have different filters and different vantage points.
Right.
And I'll end this today on just this thought. I don't like politics in general. I'm not a fan of politicians in general.
I think you're the norm. I think that's the norm.
I can't remember the quote, but it's something along the lines of politics is supposed to be a way of giving back at the end of your time in your life if you've been successful in business. And the moment it changed from the way to give back to a career, we were all doomed.
Exactly.
It's a career.
Exactly.
And when people are doing it as a career, they're always going to lead with what's best for me before what's best for everybody else.
That's right.
So I'm not a fan of politics in general, politicians in general, either side in general, because quite frankly, because it's a career, I just don't trust them. And so anytime I see either side speak, I always take it with a grain of salt. I always think, well, what shell game are they running today? Look over here, but really what I want is over here.
Good.
And that for me makes me do exactly what you're talking about. I don't really care which party wins. I don't really care if there's a third party that gets installed. What I care about is these 4 walls. That's what my wife and I always quote, these 4 walls. What's best for the people that live inside these 4 walls, i.e. my family? Well, what's best for my family is strong healthcare system, strong food supply, strong economic policies, definitely reduction in war. And don't get me wrong, I understand that you have to, if you want peace, sometimes you have to show strength.
Peace through strength. Peace through strength.
Right? I get that. Yeah. But there's a lot of reasons why wars are started for other people's agendas. I think people are smart enough to know that.
That's exactly right.
The less wars there are, the better for everybody. When I look at things like gas prices, house prices, inflation, the mass layoffs that have happened over the last 3 months, I'm looking at option A or option B and saying, I don't really like either of them, but let's just take my opinion of them off the table.
Like I just said, remove the emotion.
Which one has done the things that impact these 4 walls in a more positive manner? And that's the way that I I would vote and I would support.
It's a great way to look at it because you're staying in the middle. The one thing I would say about both candidates, Trump, Harris, Biden, whatever, is in the last 4 years on both, they both did a terrible job on Kennedy's number one issue, which was tackling the chronic disease crisis.
Yeah,
they didn't do it.
Even talking about
They're not even talking about it. The whole COVID thing was mismanaged from one administration to the next, both to blame. Biden had it longer, but both to blame. And that's his number one thing. And he's been on that for 20, 30 plus years. So if whatever party he's going to go to implement the stopping and the slowing down and the investigations of the food system and the soil and the air and the sky and the water and the environment and the chronic disease crisis, that's a guy that you should take pretty seriously, regardless of who he supports, because he's playing chess right now. And he's for the kids, and he's for the people, and he always has been, and his track record proves it. And right now, what he's doing is he's aligning himself with any party right now that's going to allow him to put an agenda in place that puts the kids first, that tackles the chronic disease crisis, that tackles the censorship regime, and that tackles world wars not being a business model in which we're sending money and weapons and troops all over the world. Those are the three. That was in his speech. We'll include it down below. There's a lot of information to unpack, but there's a lot on the line here. There's a ton on the line here. And a Kennedy, right? To flip parties. I shouldn't say flip parties, but to endorse the other party. He hasn't flipped parties in independent. To endorse the other party is a big deal. And it's not because he likes Trump, and it's not because he wants to be a Republican, and it certainly isn't for show. If you listen to the resources we provide down below, it's because of those three issues that, frankly, if they escalate, we don't have a country in 4 years. We really don't. So, Aaron, good questions. As you can see, curveballs are good for me. I hit them out of the park generally. But keep them coming. This was an important one, I think, because people really need to understand the dynamics of a Kennedy stepping across the aisle to potentially form, in closing here, a uniparty in which both sides can come together and create policies that are good for the people, not big business and big government. That's the takeaway I want to leave everybody with. Aaron, as always, great time. We'll see you in the next show. That's Aaron. I'm Andrew. This one's a wrap.